Please give this video a thumbs up to help us reach a wider audience. Thanks for your support. Haunted Cabin in the Woods Horror Story. The cabin was charming, with a cozy fireplace, a comfortable bed, and all the amenities she needed to live off the grid for a few weeks. But as the sun began to set on her first day there, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She heard strange noises coming from outside, the rustling of leaves and the creaking of branches that seemed to be getting closer and closer. When she peeked through the window, she saw nothing but darkness, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. As the night wore on, Sarah's nerves grew more and more frayed. Every little sound made her jump, and she found herself checking and rechecking the locks on the doors and windows. But despite her fear, she couldn't deny the rush of excitement she felt at the thought of being alone in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but her thoughts and her words to keep her company. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling a little more rested, but still on edge. She tried to shake off the feeling of unease as she made herself a cup of coffee and settled down at her laptop to work on her book. But as she typed away, she heard something strange coming from the other room. It sounded like something had fallen over, or maybe even shattered. Sarah tensed up, her heart pounding in her chest as she slowly made her way to the other room. But when she got there, she saw nothing out of place. It was as if the sound had never happened. She tried to brush it off, telling herself that she was just being paranoid. But as the days went on, the strange occurrences only became more frequent. Objects would move on their own, strange voices would whisper in her ear, and sometimes Sarah would swear she could feel someone breathing down her neck. Despite her growing fear, Sarah couldn't bring herself to leave the cabin. Something about it called to her, drawing her deeper and deeper into its mystery. But as she would soon discover, the secrets hidden in the woods were far more terrifying than she ever could have imagined. As the days went on, Sarah's unease only continued to grow. She would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and with a sense of dread in her stomach that she couldn't shake. The cabin seemed to be closing in on her, suffocating her with its oppressive silence and foreboding atmosphere. She tried to focus on her writing, but found herself constantly distracted by the strange noises and inexplicable movements around her. Books would fall off the shelves, the furniture would shift overnight, and sometimes she would hear footsteps on the creaky old floorboards, even when she knew she was alone. One night, Sarah woke up to find the fireplace roaring, even though she was sure she had put it out before going to bed. As she approached it, she saw that the flames had taken on a strange, almost otherworldly quality. They flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had always been a rational person, but there was something about this cabin that defied explanation. She began to wonder if she was losing her mind, if the isolation and the stress of her writing had finally caught up with her. But deep down, Sarah knew that there was something more sinister at play. The cabin seemed to have a life of its own, a malevolent energy that she couldn't ignore. She started to research its history, digging through old newspaper clippings and speaking with the locals, trying to uncover the truth about what had happened in this place. What she found was a chilling tale of murder and madness, of a previous owner who had gone insane and killed his entire family before taking his own life. Some said that his ghost still haunted the cabin, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to disturb his resting place. Sarah tried to tell herself that it was all just superstition, that there was a rational explanation for everything she had experienced. But deep down, she knew that the truth was far more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. The cabin was haunted, and there was no escaping its grasp. Despite her growing fear and unease, Sarah couldn't bring herself to leave the cabin. She felt drawn to it, as if it held some kind of power over her. Every night, she would huddle under her covers, listening to the strange noises that echoed through the woods, wondering what horrors lay just beyond the walls of the cabin. As she delved deeper into the history of the place, Sarah began to uncover more and more disturbing details. She learned that the previous owner had been a reclusive writer, just like herself, and that he had been consumed by his work in the months leading up to the murder-suicide. She read through his old journals, filled with rambling, nonsensical entries that spoke of dark rituals and blood sacrifices. The more she read, the more she felt like she was losing her grip on reality. The cabin seemed to be infecting her mind, twisting her thoughts and emotions until she could no longer tell what was real and what was just her imagination. One night, Sarah woke up to find the words "Get out" scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood. She screamed, scrambling out of bed and fumbling for the light switch. But when she turned it on, the writing was gone, as if it had never been there at all. From that point on, Sarah knew that she had to leave. The cabin was no longer a sanctuary, but a prison, trapping her in a nightmare from which she might never escape. She packed her bags, trying to keep her hands from shaking as she hurriedly threw her belongings into a suitcase. But as she made her way to the door, something caught her eye. It was a reflection in the window, a shadowy figure standing just outside, watching her with empty eyes. Sarah froze, unable to move as the figure beckoned to her, its hand outstretched in a silent invitation. It was then that she knew that leaving the cabin would not be so easy. The ghost of the previous owner was still there, still seeking vengeance for the horrors that had befallen him and his family. And if Sarah wasn't careful, she might become his next victim. Sarah stood frozen in fear, watching as the shadowy figure outside the window beckoned to her with a spectral hand. She knew that she had to leave the cabin, but the ghost of the previous owner seemed to have other plans. The figure grew more insistent, its whispers echoing through the walls of the cabin. Sarah could feel its cold breath on the back of her neck, its presence suffocating her. She knew that she had to confront the ghost, to find out what it wanted and put an end to its reign of terror once and for all. She steeled herself, taking a deep breath before stepping outside into the darkness. The moon was full and bright, casting an eerie glow over the woods around her. She could feel the cold wind on her face, the crunch of leaves under her feet as she made her way towards the ghostly figure. As she approached, she could see that the ghost was that of a man, his features twisted in a grotesque expression of rage and pain. He wore tattered clothes, his hands stained with what looked like dried blood. Sarah could feel her stomach lurch as she realized that this was the previous owner, the one who had gone mad and killed his family. The ghost glared at her, its eyes seeming to bore into her soul. Sarah could feel its anger and hatred, a force that threatened to overwhelm her. But she stood her ground, facing the ghost with all the courage she could muster. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. The ghost didn't answer, but Sarah could sense its malevolent energy pulsing through the air. She tried again. "What do you want from me?" The ghost hissed, its voice like a cold wind blowing through the trees. "Leave this place," it said, "or suffer the same fate as I did." Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she couldn't stay in the cabin any longer, but she also knew that leaving wouldn't be so easy. The ghost seemed to have a hold on her, a grip that wouldn't let go. She backed away slowly, her eyes fixed on the ghost. But as she turned to run, something caught her foot, sending her tumbling to the ground. She looked down to see a gnarled hand reaching up from the ground, its fingers wrapped tightly around her ankle. Sarah screamed, struggling to free herself from the ghost's grasp. But it was too late. The ghost had already claimed her, pulling her down into the earth, into a world of darkness and terror that she might never escape. Sarah's heart raced as she felt herself being dragged into the ground by the ghost's unrelenting grip. The world around her became a blur of darkness and twisted visions, as if she was falling into a nightmare that she could never wake up from. As she was pulled deeper and deeper into the earth, Sarah felt her consciousness slipping away, replaced by a sense of dread and hopelessness. She realized that she was now trapped in the same nightmare that had claimed the previous owner of the cabin, doomed to suffer the same fate as he had. But then, a glimmer of hope appeared. A faint light shone in the distance, beckoning to her like a beacon of salvation. Sarah struggled against the ghost's grip, pulling herself towards the light with all her strength. As she got closer, she could see that the light was coming from a small altar, surrounded by candles and symbols that she couldn't understand. But the altar seemed to be a source of power, a force that could break the ghost's hold on her and free her from the nightmare. With a burst of strength, Sarah broke free from the ghost's grasp, pulling herself towards the altar. She could feel the ghost's energy trying to drag her back down, but she fought it with all her might, reaching out towards the altar. As her fingers touched the surface of the altar, Sarah felt a surge of energy coursing through her body. The ghost's grip loosened, its form dissipating into the darkness. Sarah gasped for breath, her heart racing as she realized that she had broken the ghost's hold on her. She stumbled back towards the cabin, her mind reeling from the experience. But she knew that she had to leave, to escape from the nightmare that had claimed her. She packed her bags and left the cabin, never looking back. As she drove away, Sarah realized that the haunted cabin in the woods had become a part of her, a memory that would stay with her for the rest of her life. But she also knew that she had survived, that she had faced her fears and emerged victorious. And that was something that she could take with her, wherever she went. But Sarah's victory was short-lived. As she drove away from the cabin, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still following her. It was as if the ghost had latched onto her, refusing to let go. She tried to tell herself that it was just her imagination, that the nightmare was over. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing mile. She could feel a cold chill running down her spine, as if the ghost was right behind her. Suddenly, she heard a loud thud from the back of her car. She jumped in her seat, her heart racing as she pulled over to the side of the road. She got out of the car and went to check the trunk, only to find that it was empty. But as she closed the trunk, she heard a whisper, a voice that sounded like it was coming from the woods. "Leave this place," it said, "or suffer the same fate as I did." Sarah froze, her mind racing as she realized that the ghost was still with her, still haunting her. She got back in the car and drove away as fast as she could, but the feeling of being followed never went away. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Sarah tried to put the nightmare behind her, to move on with her life. But no matter where she went, the ghost seemed to follow her. She could feel its presence everywhere, a constant reminder of the horror that she had experienced in the haunted cabin in the woods. Eventually, Sarah could take it no longer. She knew that she had to confront the ghost once and for all, to find a way to banish it from her life forever. She researched every possible way to banish a ghost, poring over ancient texts and speaking with experts in the field of the paranormal. Finally, she found a ritual that promised to banish the ghost once and for all. She gathered the necessary ingredients and performed the ritual, reciting the incantations with all the conviction she could muster. As she finished the ritual, she could feel a sense of relief washing over her. The feeling of being followed had vanished, and she knew that the ghost was gone for good. She smiled to herself, feeling a sense of pride in her ability to confront her fears and banish the evil that had haunted her. But as she turned to leave, she saw a figure standing in the shadows, watching her with glowing eyes. It was the ghost, its form twisted and contorted with rage. Sarah realized that the ritual had not banished the ghost at all. Instead, it had only angered it, making it stronger than ever before. Sarah ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. But she knew that the ghost was right behind her, its cold breath on the back of her neck. She could feel the darkness closing in around her, threatening to swallow her whole. In a moment of desperation, Sarah turned to face the ghost. She stared into its eyes, refusing to back down. And in that moment, something changed. The ghost seemed to lose its power, fading away into the darkness. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that she had finally conquered her fears. She got back in her car and drove away, the haunted cabin in the woods becoming nothing more than a memory, a reminder of the darkness that she had overcome. But the memory of the haunted cabin in the woods continued to haunt Sarah, even after she had banished the ghost. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she had uncovered. Driven by a sense of curiosity, she returned to the cabin, determined to uncover its secrets. She searched every corner, turning over every stone in her quest for answers. As she delved deeper into the cabin's past, she discovered a dark history. The cabin had once been home to a family of settlers who had been brutally murdered by a group of outlaws. Their spirits had been trapped in the cabin ever since, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to enter. Sarah realized that she had only scratched the surface of the cabin's dark secrets. She knew that she had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah became consumed by her search for answers. She barely slept, spending every waking moment poring over old journals and documents, determined to uncover the truth. But as she delved deeper into the cabin's history, strange things began to happen. She heard whispers in the darkness, saw shadows moving in the corner of her eye. The ghost had returned, and it was stronger than ever before. Sarah realized that she had made a terrible mistake in returning to the cabin. She knew that she had to leave, to escape the darkness that threatened to consume her. But it was too late. The ghost had already trapped her, its dark presence overwhelming her. She screamed for help, but there was no one around to hear her. As the ghost closed in, Sarah realized that she had been too consumed by her quest for answers. She had let her curiosity lead her to her doom. In her final moments, Sarah realized that the true horror of the haunted cabin in the woods was not the ghost itself, but the darkness that lay within all of us. The darkness that drives us to seek answers, no matter the cost. The darkness that can consume us whole, leaving us trapped in a nightmare from which there is no escape. As Sarah lay trapped in the haunted cabin, she felt the ghost's dark presence enveloping her. She knew that she was running out of time and that she had to act quickly if she was to have any hope of escaping the darkness. With her last ounce of strength, she reached for the journals she had been studying. She pored over the pages, searching for anything that might help her break free of the ghost's grasp. And then she found it. A passage that spoke of a ritual that could banish the ghost once and for all. The ritual required a sacrifice, a willing sacrifice, but it promised to free the cabin from the ghost's hold forever. Sarah knew what she had to do. She had to be the sacrifice. With a heavy heart, she prepared for the ritual. She lit candles, drew symbols on the floor, and recited the incantation from the journal. The ghost raged around her, trying to stop her, but Sarah remained focused. As the incantation reached its climax, Sarah felt a surge of energy coursing through her body. She knew that this was it, the moment of truth. With a final burst of strength, she plunged a knife into her own heart, offering herself as the sacrifice. The ghost screamed in rage as Sarah's life ebbed away. But as she died, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had done it. She had banished the ghost and freed the haunted cabin from its hold. But as her consciousness began to fade, Sarah realized something else. Something that made her blood run cold. The ghost was not the only horror lurking in the haunted cabin in the woods. There was something far more sinister at play, something that had been manipulating events from the very beginning. As Sarah's vision faded to black, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was a tall, dark figure, shrouded in a cloak of darkness. The figure spoke in a voice that echoed through the cabin, chilling Sarah to the bone. "Congratulations, Sarah," the figure said. "You have played your part well. But there is still so much more to come." And with those words, the figure vanished into the darkness. Sarah died, her body slumping to the floor. But her soul remained, trapped in the haunted cabin in the woods. For years, the cabin remained empty, a place of darkness and horror. But then, one day, a new family moved in. They were a young couple, eager to start their new life together. At first, they were happy in the cabin. But soon, strange things began to happen. They heard whispers in the darkness, saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. And then, one day, they found Sarah's journal. As they read through the pages, they realized the terrible truth that the haunted cabin in the woods was cursed, and that they were trapped within its grasp. But it was too late. The darkness had already consumed them. And as they screamed in terror, Sarah's ghost watched from the shadows, her eyes filled with tears. She had tried to warn them, but they had not listened. And now, they were doomed to share her fate, trapped forever in the haunted cabin in the woods, a place of darkness and horror. As the new family struggled to come to terms with the reality of their situation, they realized that they had to do something to break the curse. They scoured Sarah's journal for clues, hoping to find a way to banish the evil that had taken root in the cabin. They tried everything: holy water, sage smudging, even calling in a paranormal investigator, but nothing worked. The ghosts seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, feeding off their fear and desperation. As the months turned into years, the family began to lose hope. They resigned themselves to their fate, accepting that they would never escape the haunted cabin in the woods. But then, one day, something changed. A glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon, in the form of a new neighbor who had recently moved into the area. The neighbor was an old woman, wise and kind, and she had a deep understanding of the supernatural. When she learned of the family's plight, she immediately offered to help. Together, they delved into the history of the cabin, tracing its origins back to a time when the land was inhabited by Native Americans. They discovered that the cabin had been built on sacred ground, and that the spirits of the ancestors had never been laid to rest. Using this knowledge, the old woman devised a new ritual, one that honored the spirits and asked for their forgiveness. She led the family in a ceremony, chanting ancient words and offering gifts to the spirits. And then, something miraculous happened. The ghost that had haunted the cabin for so long began to fade away, its hold on the family weakening with each passing moment. The family felt a sense of liberation, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from their shoulders. They realized that they were finally free from the haunted cabin in the woods. As they left the cabin behind, they felt a sense of gratitude towards the old woman who had saved them. They knew that they would never forget her kindness and wisdom, and that they owed her a debt that could never be repaid. And yet, even as they drove away from the cabin, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them, something that lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. For Sarah's ghost still haunted the cabin, trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and despair. And as long as the cabin stood, she knew that others would suffer the same fate as she had. But the old woman had given the family hope, and that was something that Sarah had never had. She watched as the family drove away, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude and sorrow. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. She knew that one day, someone would come along who could break the curse once and for all. And until that day came, she would wait, trapped in the haunted cabin in the woods, a place of darkness and horror. But she would not give up hope, for she knew that one day, the darkness would be banished, and the light would shine once again. Years had passed since the family had left the haunted cabin in the woods, but Sarah's ghost still lingered, trapped in the cycle of fear and despair. She had watched as countless others had come and gone, all falling prey to the same curse that had haunted her for so long. But now, a group of brave adventurers had arrived, determined to break the curse and put an end to the evil that lurked within the cabin. The group consisted of a psychic, a historian, and a paranormal investigator, all of whom had been drawn to the area by the rumors of the haunted cabin. They had spent months researching the history of the land, delving into ancient texts and speaking with locals who had lived in the area for generations. Armed with their knowledge and skills, the group made their way to the cabin, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. As they approached the cabin, they could feel the weight of the curse bearing down on them, a palpable force that threatened to overwhelm them at every turn. But they pressed on, determined to face whatever lay ahead. As they entered the cabin, they were immediately struck by a sense of foreboding, as if the very air itself was thick with malevolent energy. The psychic, sensing the presence of the ghost, began to speak in hushed tones, attempting to communicate with Sarah's spirit. But she received no response, only the eerie sound of footsteps echoing through the cabin. The historian, meanwhile, began to examine the various artifacts and relics scattered throughout the cabin, searching for clues to the source of the curse. As she pored over old journals and maps, she began to piece together the history of the land, tracing the curse back to its origins in the time of the Native Americans. And then, suddenly, the investigator let out a cry of alarm. He had discovered a hidden chamber beneath the cabin, one that had been sealed off for centuries. As the group made their way into the chamber, they could feel the curse growing stronger, the darkness closing in around them. But they pressed on, determined to uncover the source of the evil that had plagued the cabin for so long. And then, they saw it, a statue of an ancient deity, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The psychic sensed immediately that this was the source of the curse. That the statue had been imbued with the power of the spirits and used to create the curse that had haunted the cabin for generations. With a sense of determination, the group set about destroying the statue, using every tool and weapon at their disposal. And finally, after hours of battling the curse and its minions, they succeeded. As the statue crumbled to dust, the curse was lifted, and Sarah's ghost appeared before them, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for freeing me from this curse, for giving me the chance to rest at last." And with those words, Sarah's ghost disappeared, her spirit finally at peace. The group looked around the cabin, their hearts filled with a sense of triumph and relief, knowing that they had succeeded where so many others had failed. As they left the cabin, they knew that they had done something truly remarkable, that they had banished the evil that had haunted the land for centuries. And though they knew that there would always be more horrors waiting in the shadows, they also knew that they had the courage and determination to face them, no matter what dangers lay ahead. The group emerged from the cabin, exhausted but victorious, and made their way back to civilization. As they drove away, they could feel the weight of the curse lifting, the air around them growing lighter and clearer. But even as they left the cursed land behind, they knew that their work was not yet done. They had uncovered a dark and ancient evil, one that threatened not only the people who had lived on that land for generations but all of humanity. And so, they resolved to continue their work, to seek out other sources of evil and to fight against them with all their strength. As they drove, they discussed their next steps, planning their strategy and considering their options. They knew that the world was full of dangers, both seen and unseen, but they were determined to face them head-on, to bring light to the darkness and to restore hope to those who had lost it. And as they looked out at the world around them, they knew that they had found their calling, that they had a purpose in life that was greater than themselves. For they were the guardians of humanity, the ones who stood between the darkness and the light, and they would fight with every fiber of their being to keep the world safe and free from evil. As they drove into the night, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose and determination, they knew that they had accomplished something truly remarkable, and that their work was far from over. For the battle against evil was a never-ending one, and they would fight it until their dying breath, knowing that the fate of humanity rested in their hands. In the end, the group had succeeded in defeating the curse that had haunted the cabin in the woods for generations. But their victory had come at a great cost, and they had been forced to confront not only the evil that lurked within the cabin but also the darkness that resided within themselves. Through their trials and tribulations, they had come to understand the power of the human spirit, the strength that could be found in the face of adversity, and the importance of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And as they looked back on their journey, they knew that they had been forever changed by the experience, that they had grown and evolved into something greater than they had ever thought possible. For they had faced their fears head-on, and in doing so, had overcome them, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as they looked out at the world around them, they knew that there were still many battles to be fought, that there were still evils to be vanquished, and that they would continue to fight with all their strength, no matter what the future held. For they were the guardians of humanity, the ones who stood between the darkness and the light, and they would never give up, never surrender. For they were the guardians of humanity, the ones who stood between the darkness and the light, and they would never give up, never surrender, until the world was a safe and just place for all who called it home. And so, with their hearts full of hope and determination, they set out on the next leg of their journey, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Secure in the knowledge that they had each other and the unshakable belief that they could make a difference, no matter how small. For in the end, it was not the size of the victory that mattered, but the strength of the heart that won the battle, and they had proven beyond a doubt that they had hearts of steel, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the will to make the world a better place. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and be the first to know when new videos are posted. Access exclusive content and promotions while staying up to date on industry trends. Please give this video a thumbs up to help us reach a wider audience. Thanks for your support.